All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thirsty Thursday number 15, reloaded. Sorry we missed 2 weeks ago. We had something come up. Steve was called into work. Bobby was basking on the beach down in the Outer Banks, enjoying his vacation, and had some trouble with his banana hammock and trying to get in off the beach, a little sunburn. So we had to cancel 2 weeks ago, so we apologize. But here we go. And tonight we have a special guest, Michael Hickman. Cheers. Yes.
Cheers.
We haven't done this in a while. Cheers, brothers. It's good to see you again. So for tonight, we had planned on talking with Steve Hoovenen about the fatal fire that Wilmington, Delaware had, and how that's kind of changed him. But unfortunately, he's at work tonight. So tonight we've got Hickman. We're going to talk with him, and obviously Trevor and Bobby, just about things that through our careers worked out for us. Maybe when we thought that they were, maybe when we thought that they weren't, and then the opposite. And then kind of depending on how things are going in our time and all that kind of stuff, and maybe mixed in through all of this, talk about our mentors and the people we learned a lot from, both good and bad. Because remember, your mentors, they can teach you great stuff, but you can sometimes learn just as much from a bad leader as you do from a good leader. So with that being said, before I kick it around, I just want to give a shout out to one of our cadets in the Salisbury Fire Department. Cadet Seth Taman was recently awarded the MIMS Right Care When It Counts Award. He started a Narcan education program in Wacomico County Public Schools. In the first training that he did, he taught they taught 17 teachers how to use Narcan. And his plan is, as things kind of go back to normal, to start that plan up and get it more widespread throughout the county and throughout the Board of Education. So great job, Bob. Keep it up. And maybe we'll have you on here one night if you're watching. So with that, we'll kick it over to Trevor and keep it going.
All right, great. Thanks, Ben. Tonight, I'm excited and terrified to have Mike Hickman on the program. I've got to say that Mike is one of the people I've known the longest in the fire service. He's actually one of the first people I met in the fire service, him and Del Baker, believe it or not. And that's another terrifying story in itself, from the mind of a very impressionable 16-year-old cadet who came into a fire station at Montego Bay in Ocean City, and the people working were Mike and Del. So as you can see, it's had no deleterious effect on me whatsoever over the years. I'm still a little bit twitchy, but it's all good. But when you talk about people being an example, Ben, just to kind of paraphrase a little bit of a George Washington quote, that people are always an example, whether good or bad, has an impact on you. And those are some of the things I think we'll talk about tonight. Mike is one of those people, one of many people I've been very fortunate to not only meet but work with in the fire service, and who've had a positive impact. And I will say this before we even start, Mike, love you to death. Mike's been there through both personally and professionally with me through some of the best times of my life, some of the worst times of my life, and actually some of the most freaking hysterical times of my life. So, Mike, thanks for always being there, no matter what the outcome was. But these are people that you might not talk to every single day or communicate with every day, but at the drop of a hat, they're always there for you every day. So that's what the Brotherhood's about in the fire service. And I do have to say that about Mike. Over his career, he's had experience in not only the fire service but law enforcement and a variety of other interests that I'll let him talk about. So with that, again, Mike, welcome. Glad to have you here. We did reach out to the FCC to make sure we have at least a 30-second delay, because Mike has no filter. It kind of goes from brain to mouth, and that's one of his most endearing qualities. So I'm sure that if you're easily offended, this might be the time to go to more of a PG rated webcast. But I'm sure Mike will keep it within due bounds. But anyway, Mike, great to have you here tonight. Love you, brother. And I'm going to kick it over to Bobby for a little introduction on his end.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, Chief Hickman. Good to have you, brother. It's exciting to talk to different people, and Mike has a really good, extensive history I can't wait to hear about. And I'm really looking forward tonight. And, we don't talk enough about our mentors. We definitely don't. And that's something we should talk about more. Those people that influence you early on when you start this gig off, that put you in the right direction. And you can talk a little bit about people that put you in the wrong direction, but I think we all know those people that we saw. And we've all tried things. We've all, I always say when you first start off, you haven't done anything right. And you try to do some things, some things go right, some don't. So I look forward to the discussion. So, Mr. Hickman, how about introduce yourself to everybody, brother?
I don't have a first name. It's just Hickman. That's how it's been from day one. My tale in the fire service is kind of started at the bottom, worked my way to the top. But my first day in emergency services was a tragic day in the history of Ocean City. My first day that I ran an emergency call was July 16th of 1983. And we all know that was the day Jeffrey Dieter lost his life at the Saute Cafe, which is why a 17-year-old who was just completing EMT was basically forced into service. So I started my career under a circumstance which led me to two avenues. If you worked with me in Ocean City, you hung around with me in Berlin, I was a character. I had a humorous side, the prankster, but I also had a very serious side. And that's part of what I learned literally on day one was this is a deadly profession that we're in. And right, wrong, or indifferent, we have to do everything we can to enjoy ourselves because we don't know how long we're going to have. And we also have to take this job very seriously because in a moment's notice, you can be gone from this earth because of it. So I started in Berlin as a volunteer. Within a year, I had an interview in Ocean City, which consisted of the EMS captain at the time, Cover Ellingsworth, a legend, Steve Price, Roger Steger. My interview consisted of, when I sat down in the administrator's office, was, I guess we're hiring another Berlin boy. So that was the summer of 1984. I progressed up through from everything from a seasonal EMT to a dispatcher to a CRT to a paramedic to a shift leader to I was gone and on the greener pastures. So I cut my teeth in Ocean City, and then in 1999, while I was taking a rest break at headquarters in the bathroom upstairs in the bunk room with a fire engineering magazine, I came across an ad. And the ad was for a fire chief's position in a place outside of York City, Pennsylvania, a place called Springett's Ferry. The ad had expired by a day. So I called my then mother-in-law and said, haha, you missed a chance to have your daughter back home, so on and so forth, since that's where she was from. And long story short, I applied for the job late. I sent 2 resumes, faxed one, mailed one. I got 2 responses back. One was, you have an interview on such and such a date, and the other one was no thank you. So I should have taken that as an omen, but you live and learn. Ended up getting hired full-time as a career chief at the age of 34. And let's just say the Eastern Shore of Maryland is a little bit different than York, Pennsylvania. So there are a lot of lessons learned there. I tried to follow some of my mentors that I had early on in Ocean City, their leadership style. And I'm going to name Ron Schneider as probably one of the biggest ones that I had. He was a captain, volunteer side, career guy, very, very bright when it came to people, to leadership style. And he was not the laissez-faire type leader, but he also wasn't the dictator. He's going to ram this down your throat. He did things in a way and manner which you understood it. He did it with a little humor and did it in a way in which you could understand it. And as I sit back and I look at this, Ron at the most was 24, 25 years old. I was 19, when all this was going on. So you have to take that also with a grain of salt. He was the type of guy where if he had a call lifeguard struck by lightning. The first thing he did was got a dustpan and said, if this is truly what happened, that this is all we're going to need. Of course, that wasn't the case, but I try to emulate guys like that when I was coming up through the ranks and learning the fire service. It's guys like that made me appreciate the fire service. And I'm sure as we get along in conversation, we'll get into some of the negative folks that we've all had the encounter with, that we extracted information from them that was what I'm not going to do, how I'm not going to act. I swear I'll never be that guy or gal. And that all helps you build you as a leader. And you're able to take all that information and move forward. So I appreciate you folks inviting me, and I'm looking forward to this discussion that we get into. And as we move on, I'll get into more of the my law enforcement history. But I do appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Thanks for joining us, and thank you guys for Trevor and Bobby for keeping this going. I know we're at 15 episodes, so it's at like 30 weeks. It'd be 32 because 15 would have been 2 weeks ago. So thank you guys. I thoroughly enjoy these. I look at these, look forward to these every week and setting them up and getting them running. And talking about mentors and talking about people that have brought you up in the fire service. Unfortunately, Hickman was gone when I came to Ocean City, but I had the opportunity to work for Trevor and work for Bobby. And I have to say that it was truly an honor working for both of them since I no longer am there. But it was, you talk about those people that get you going, they point you in the right direction. And, sometimes, and I know I'm one of those people that you get going in a direction that is probably not the right direction. And then you have the people that kind of bring you back into the guardrails and say, no, this is where we're going to stay. And being a captain in Salisbury, it's definitely one of those things. It's like, oh, wow, I understand like some of the trouble that I put those guys through and try and change my ways and keep things different. I'll never forget, I had a member, I was the acting assistant chief here in Salisbury one day on shift, and I go into the firehouse, and one of our volunteers is in there going, and he's a great guy, great kid, but you just never know what's going to come out of his mouth next. And he's hysterical, and he's going off, and I'm like, holy cow, like, please shut up. Please stop talking. No, stop. I got to go. Or you got to go. I got to go. Somebody's got to go. And as I'm like trying to get him quiet, I'm like, this is what Doug Scott must feel like when he walks in the firehouse and sees me standing there. And I think it was either that night or the next day. I was texted. I sent him a text. Hey, Cap, I'm sorry. I really love working for you. All that kind of stuff. And later we got to catch up and talk about it. And he's just laughing at me. Like, Waples, you don't even like. You're the least of my worries. So. What are some of the things that you guys, through your mentors and that kind of stuff, what was really driven home for you guys to keep you going in the right direction?
Well, Ben, a couple things real quick. One, I guess, pseudo correction I'll ask you to make, and I this is about how you feel, but when you said it, and I appreciate the kind words about, you say working for me and Bobby. I know a lot of times I look at working with people, not that they work for me. And I know that might be a technicality or what have you, but at the end of the day, the glitter shit on your collar, that's an assignment. That's your duty. That's what you have to check the boxes off and hopefully do the right thing each day. But, especially when it comes to like the EMS side of the world, my patch is no different than your patch. They don't put like a special little, segment on there that says, okay, you're a lieutenant, a captain, this, that, and the other. So I think when you build those relationships at work, and I look at the people that I've worked with over the years and kind of getting a start, Mike, this will be a little blast from the past for you. My entrance into the fire service was actually through being a member of the Boy Scouts. And we did a firemanship merit badge. I had an interest in it. At the time, I was on the track to go into the Naval Academy. And I was able to do some stuff. And unfortunately, my father had passed away when I was 16. I was the first person I ever did CPR on. Didn't work, by the way. But nevertheless, I looked at people who were on that crew that a couple of years later, I wound up working with some of these people, Chauncey Bowers, Clay Shaw, J.D. Wells. And that was an impression on me because I was a recipient of the service. And I remembered these guys, not by name, but then when I read an ambulance report later on out of curiosity, and now I'm working side by side with this person, and it's like they were there in one of my worst moments. So, here, these were people I started to look at as positive mentors, a very negative situation, but very positive people in the industry. One of my first days in the fire service, when I was doing work study as a senior in high school, I go up to Fire Station 4 in Ocean City, and lo and behold, who's working but Michael Hickman and Delbert Baker. Both of them very psychotic individuals. They were actually doing their house duties and putting some 3-in-1 oil in the exterior door locks. And when I was introduced to them, they literally turned around with a syringe full of oil and eyes this big and started laughing and made me run. So you're back. Now, we can't do that again. That's pages 6, 7, and 8 of the HR manual today. But nevertheless, these were people who, along with great volunteer officers and one of them still very active, but people like Jimmy Childs, Mike Hastings, these people who they would bring you under their wing, they would pat you on the back when you did a good job, and then immediately put a foot up your ass to make sure that you didn't get cocky, and they would keep you in check, and they guided you, they mentored you. And these were people that this was not their primary occupation, but they were firemen. They were firemen through and through. And, even to this day, people that I have a great deal of respect for. The first interior structure fire went on when I knocked Jimmy Childs' helmet off his head, and I thought all 8 feet of him was going to kill me. But nevertheless, he just put his hand this big on my shoulder and said, okay, kid, you got this. So it was one of those things where you started to see how they interacted with somebody. And, here I am, some young snot-nosed kid full of piss and vinegar. I want to do the right thing. I'm kind of spazzy. And I don't know my asshole from my elbow. Can I say that on here? Anyway, my rectal orifice from my elbow. But anyway, the point being is they had the patience to say, okay, look, maybe you got some potential. I'll be patient with you and try to teach you the right thing. But it was up to me to accept that criticism and go forward instead of just putting up those walls. So I look at people like that, people who kind of had experience in the industry, people like a Skip Carey who would go, all right, boys, that attic's off. When we were doing some live burns, and of course, me, Maycrans, some other guys, we're going to go up in that attic and put it out because at that time we figured we could put out hell with a water pistol. We go up there, have our asses handed to us, tumble down the stairs, and here's somebody standing on a New York hook going, "Told you." So it's we kind of had that trial by fire, but at the same time, you saw the positives of how some of the people reacted, and then you also saw the very negative end of things. And like you guys have already mentioned, you said I'd never want to be that guy. So you look at the positive attributes, a person like a Dougie Scott who always had that very calm and confident demeanor about them, but always took the time. Even as a cadet, when I would come up, Dougie just busted his ass all morning at the station, got done all the station duties, and here comes this young cadet from high school. Hey, Mr. Scott, can you show me how to use a human valve? And he'd peel himself up out of the chair, and we would go back for the next 2 hours. I know he was tired. I know the last thing he wanted to do was deal with a 16-year-old kid, but at the same time, he was one of those people that he wouldn't let me get away with doing things until I got it right. He made me do it till I couldn't get it wrong. So those were the kind of people, and Hickman and Dell, same thing. They always pushed you to be better, and they held you accountable. And guess what? They don't make Band-Aids for feelings, and they made that very apparent to you. But it helped you grow and helped you become not only better at your profession, but better at being a human being that could actually sit back and go, okay, is this really a big deal? Is it not a big deal? How's this going to affect me? And I want to emulate that. And when it comes my time to pay that forward, I don't look at that as a burden. It's an obligation. So, again, thanks to all those guys that I mentioned, Mike, you included in that group, but that's how I've been able to frame this as over a career, and feel that it's definitely an obligation, especially from probably the midpoint of my career on till now, really try to give some of that back. So again, Mike, thank you for being part of that very elite group. Even though your choice of facial covering is a little bit disturbing to me right now, but I'm trying to get used to that. But with that, I'll kick it over to Bobby.
Wow, you throw a shot, then you turn it over to somebody else. Huh? Let's see how this is going. I guess the best way to do it is to talk about mentors, is to talk about, how it related to me. So I started off, I didn't come from a fire service family. My father wasn't in the fire service. I didn't really have brothers in the fire service. I had a cousin that would come down in the summertime. I lived in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where I grew up at. And a cousin would come down. He's very active in, I think it's called Sandy Springs Fire Department up in, I think it's Montgomery County, I believe. But anyways, he was very active up there, and I think he was their chief for a while. And he ended up being a chief down at, I guess, Texas A&M or whatever. But he just got me interested in it a little bit. He was really fired up with it, and I thought, man, that's really cool. And I really like firemen anyway, and I just thought it was pretty cool. And I started hanging out as a little kid at Rehoboth Firehouse with, actually, Chuck Schneider's dad was there, and it was crazy the people that were going on, in the past. But anyways, my fire service career actually started in the Navy when I joined the Navy, and I went on the fire crew on a Navy ship, the USS Sumter. I was in the Navy, and I worked my way up to they called it a number one nozzleman, which I'm not going to get Navy firefighting, but very, very different thing shipboard firefighting is. But there was none of that brotherhood, none of that kind of thing that I've seen in the American Fire Service. Is really just kind of what you did on the ship. So general quarters sounded, and we would go to our firefighting duty, and that was basically what we did for the ship. So when I came out of there, I came to the American Fire Service, I call it, which was actually my very beginning. And I'll never forget it. The first person that I met after I had applied in the fire department was Doug Scott. And believe it or not, Doug Scott was like the youngest fire chief in Delaware at the time. And he sat me down and he talked to me. And Doug, to this day, has been my number one mentor, the first person that made me think that I wanted to be good at this, not just do this, There was another few guys around that started like a year before me. The Hoovenens brothers, Steve and Eric Hoovenen, were there. And at that point, the big thing back then was to go to a whole bunch of state fire schools and get all your training very, very quickly. And that's kind of what I did. As I went through life and stayed in the fire service, I always say I survived two things so far: my teenage life and the fire service. So far, somehow I didn't get killed in neither one of them, but I certainly tried to. But as I grew up in the fire service and stayed around here, I've always been kind of more of a smaller, lower volume fire departments my entire career, my vocation when I was also a volunteer. But I met some really good people. Mike Lombardo came in town, and Trevor, you remember him coming in town. And, Mike was a very, very good guy, and he taught me for a little bit. I was doing training in Ocean City at the time, and he really gave me some great insight into thought processes about the difference between aggressive and being rude and things like that. And then through FDIC and a bunch of other training, I became friends with a guy named Ray McCormick up in FDNY. So I met a lot of really cool people. But what did it mean to me? Well, when I look backwards, the people that really meant something to me were closest to the 50-50 split. And what I mean by that was they were honest. So if you had a good fire, they'd say that was a fantastic fire. If you had a bad fire, they'd say that was a bad fire. And so I think I always kind of gravitated towards the honesty of those guys. But the good fire thing's hard for a lot of us to do. I think it's very forced for us to congratulate other firefighters or other paramedics, or it's just not in our nature to kind of do that. We kind of want to be the guy that says, we do this all the time and this is normal for us and all that. But in reality, it's not. We do some pretty amazing things at times, And so when I look at my whole history of where it is, I think it's guys that are honest. The only thing that I really missed in growing up in this service was I was often way too nice and way too allowed too much stuff when I became a manager. And that is actually a form of dishonesty in my mind, because you don't like what's happening and you're not telling these guys you don't like what's happening. And so the mentors I looked back at those guys and I thought, they didn't hold back. They weren't nice to me. They weren't mean to me. They just said, hey, that was dumb, Bob. Why'd you do that? That was, those types of things. But if I did something good, it was good. So I think in a nutshell, for 32 years, that really kind of narrows it down for me that, those guys that were more balanced in the middle, and we all go through periods where we're not. We all become unbalanced through this ride, man. Sometimes you're just really negative. Sometimes you just don't want to deal with other stuff, and you don't want to tell people bad things because you want to be in a happier place. And we all ride those rides, but this is all about readjusting as we go through this fire service, just readjusting what we're doing and how we're thinking, and, learning from the lessons learned, I guess you could say. So that's essentially, my whole spin on it. I've always been in slower fire departments. And so I really got to kind of lean on guys in these busier fire departments. And I found a lot of guys that I could really trust and to tell me the real deal. And then I can couple that with the experience, even in slower fire departments. After 30-some years, you see something here and there and other places. So that's kind of my spin on it. Mike, you want to talk, I think, about your mentors a little bit and some of the things that didn't go well for you, and we'll go around that way.
Yeah, if I can figure out how to operate a computer, it'd be even better. But that's what happens when you don't have glasses on. You brought up 2 points. One, I can't remember what the first one was, but the brain injury. But the second one was when you are in the fire service and you're learning, you have a tendency to gravitate towards your first instructors because you trust them. You think that they are the all-knowing, the all-powerful Oz, all that. I was fortunate in my original MIFRE classes that I had the likes of Eddie Werkheiser, Joe Perdue, Skip Carey, that group of guys. And if you knew them in the fire service, it was absolutely no nonsense. They were not there to coddle you. You weren't getting a participation trophy every time you did something. It was, I'm going to teach you the life skills that you need so you survive this profession. And they didn't care if they hurt your feelings. Now, they didn't go out of their way to do that, but in the course of education, if you do something dumb, back in those days, you were chastised for it. You were educated, so to speak. So I was fortunate in that I had instructors that cared enough before it was cool to say everybody goes home, all the other stuff, that these guys really cared. That they were putting their signature on you. You were an example that they've created, and when you went forth, then you were a product of them. So I was fortunate in that right to have those guys as instructors and learn from them. And then later on in my career, I actually worked. Skip was my truck captain in Salisbury. I worked with Eddie in Salisbury. I worked with Joe in Salisbury. Not as I was a volunteer in Salisbury, but I got a chance to know them. Then I understood even more as to why they were instructing the way they were. So when I became a MIFRE instructor, I looked back and said, okay, these are the mentors that I want to follow and teach in the way and manner in which they did, because I care about my students. So that was 3 great examples right there of, in fact, I'm gonna digress just real quickly. Skip is old enough to be my dad, and I remind him of that all the time. And in fact, my birthday was just passed. 8:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from Skip Carey singing me happy birthday. So it is a lifetime of giving that these guys do, and they're dedicated to their craft and their people. So anyhow, when I started teaching for MIFRE, I wanted to do the same thing for my students. I wanted them to be a reflection of the education that I gave them. I didn't coddle. I did not probably give all the attaboys that I should have done along the way, but I imparted the knowledge and wisdom that I had developed over the course of, at that time, 15 years of fire experience, to make sure that they could survive in our profession. It is, we all know instructors who don't do that. We all know instructors who, they're there for one reason and one reason only, and that's because they can have that little chevron that says instructor. They can check that box off on the fire officer application because they want to, progress up the ladder and do whatnot. They're the dangerous folks. They're not imparting knowledge on their students that they're going to need to survive the profession. I keep saying survive their profession. It's not because you're going to get hurt in a fire. It's not because you're going to be debilitated in a fire. There's also the mental aspect. There's also a whole lot that goes into surviving this career. And I don't think they prepare, some of them don't prepare their students the way they need to. And I saw that in my career. So when it became time for me to be an instructor, I said, okay, I'm going to follow these three guys and how they did things. These instructors, now I'm going to take what I learned from them and make sure I don't impart that on my students. And I think that's a responsibility for all of us, be it instructor or not. You're in the fire service. You're going to have guys and gals coming in now that they're going to emulate you. What are you imparting on them that makes you worthy of that honor? And it is an honor. Make no mistake about that. If they are giving of their time, paying attention to you, it is your responsibility to impart the best part of you onto them, without question. Trevor, what do you think?
Brother, I couldn't have said it any better. And Mike, one of the things, you and I came up in the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute, the MIFRE system, and I became an instructor at a relatively young age, and I felt very kind of conflicted about that. I love teaching, I love learning about the trade, but I was still very young, and I look back at that. And Mike, you may or may not remember this, and I can't even remember what class it was that you were teaching, but it dates back to almost the old comedian Rodney Dangerfield days where he'd say, "Oh, no respect, no respect." And I remember a student saying to you something just kind of half kidding because you had given them some very stern constructive criticism. And they said, "Oh, no respect." And you looked at him right in the face very calmly and said, "Respect is who I go down a hallway with." And he just turned away. And it's like, I hope that I hope that resonated as much with them as it did with me, because it's like, you know what? This isn't about, and to paraphrase Bobby, this isn't about our gear, our equipment, the symbol on the side of the fire truck. This is about that 3-year-old kid in the Spider-Man pajamas that Bobby talks about all the time at the end of the hallway. And when you said that, I'm like, wow, and it's kind of that flashback when I talk about the Jimmy Childs and the Mike Hastings and the Skip Carries, where you're going inside a structure fire with them, and basically they have you on their Proby leash, which I know Mike actually literally had a Proby leash that he would clip on to probationary members. But again, in this day and age, that might be offensive. But the point being is, you were trying to say, look, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly of my career. I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to mentor this with you. Yeah, and this is a job that can kill you. It can kill you in the next 5 minutes. So you know what? We're not going to issue Band-Aids for feelings. We're going to do the right thing. And I'm going to tell you some things that you might not want to hear, but it's going to keep you alive. Or better yet, it's going to keep the people that you're serving alive. So with that being said, Mike, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You try to emulate from some of these people, but you also see where some of the training has gone, where it's become that checkbox training, just to say, okay, we're going to do a ladder drill. So you and 15 of your closest friends now are going to throw this 24-foot ladder. Let's look at this, versus how we're staffed. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation for another time. But the point being is you kind of go back, like you said, Mike, to the very first people who influenced you, good or bad. The very first shift I worked in Ocean City, I was an 18-year-old kid. I worked with George Johnson, Larry Buchanan. I was on their crew. That was the best day in my fire service career. Was my first day. I've had some other great days. I ran a house fire at 43rd Street. We ran a cardiac arrest and probably like 16 other calls that day. I'm like, oh my, I thought I hit the lottery. Okay, it was wonderful. And I had to go up to our shift commander, who was Tim Price, and go up to him and say, Mr. Price, sir, do you mind if this is my first day on the job, Mr. Price, do you mind if I leave 45 minutes early tonight? Why? I said, well, I'd like to go get my high school diploma. I graduate tonight, sir. So, that was one of the things that, that was a very, pivotal part of my fire service career, because, it established that family. And not only did he let me go 45 minutes early on my first day of work, but guys showed up to my high school graduation that I had worked with for the last 11 and a half hours, or 11 hours and 15 minutes. So that was kind of, that really established something in my mind to say, wow, this is something even more special than what I realized. And so, going forward, you look at some of the people in the industry that we've been fortunate enough to work with, and some of those initial instructors that we've had who didn't cut us any slack. And whether they had the official, like you said, Mike, the chevron that said instructor, or these were people that said, look, you're on my watch, you're underneath my supervision and care. So, this is the way it's going to be. And Mike, you've been one of those people over your career where, I guarantee, again, we go back to pages 7, 8, 9 of the employee manual. Thou shalt not put a leash on a probationary member. Mike, you would do that, and tell them why you did it. It wasn't to demean anybody, it wasn't anything else. But why would you literally put a leash on a probationary member when you're dragging them through a building?
Well, it was to teach, and we had a history both in Berlin and Ocean City. Folks would leave you, and they weren't, in my opinion, they weren't trained to experience what fire really was. And I'm responsible for that person. And I don't want them leaving me, number one, or two, crawling away from me and having another issue. But they're under my care and control. And I can control them by taking a 2.5-foot piece of rope, looping it through their Scott bottle, and putting the other hand or the other loop around my hand. I know where they are. They are in my care and control. They're not going to leave me. They're going to get taught. They're not going to get hurt, because I'm not going to put them in a situation that's going to cost them or me physical bodily harm, but they're going to get educated. And that's what needs to happen. I had to go around with MIFRE 20 years ago when the burn building first came up, and Trevor, you were involved in that also. And so that was when MIFRE was making the shift from when we could actually burn to, well, we want smoke. We don't want this. We don't want that. We don't want, anyway, long story short is I felt that they weren't getting the training they needed anymore to do a functional interior attack, because they weren't being exposed to what they're actually going to see in real life circumstances. So part of the probie leash was, you're going to see what it's really like. This is what we do. We get to the seat, we put the wet on the red, and while we're going, this is the jobs that we have to do while we're going. And the best way to see it is up close and personal. And I kept them with me. They're my responsibility.
And let's be clear about this too. That there's not. That being said, it's not like there's a bunch of cowboy crap going on. You're not going to let harm come to the person. You're trying to say, look, we can have realistic training and be safe at the same time, but we're not going to coddle you and give you a false sense of what it's like in the real world. We're going to try to get you as close as we can to real life scenario and circumstances without killing you. Because let's face it, a burn building is a controlled laboratory. That's what it's intended to be. And it's intended to be a very controlled environment where, hopefully nothing's going to go wrong. But that's what we give the students a false sense of security, because they think they've slain the dragon when they've been in the burn building, versus us saying, hey, guys, look, this is a fire simulation laboratory. This is to show you some rough conditions. We're going to show you thermal layering. We're going to show you incipient fires, a little bit of rollover. It's not going to flash on you, because this concrete's going to absorb so much heat over the next 2 and 3 hours. You're not going to get the flash over. We have to be honest with the students and tell them what it is and what it isn't. Because you have some of them coming out of there and they get a little bit of soot on their helmet, or they get a tetrahedron a little bit wrinkled, and they think that they're, Barney Badass. It's like, look, one hot fire doesn't make a fireman. I'm sorry, that's not what makes a fireman. But what does make a fireman is when you're taking in the conditions, you're seeing things, you're communicating those things, and you're doing that constant loop of going down the hallway, checking conditions, either hitting the overhead, flowing water, not flowing water, search and rescue, whatever the case is. So I think that a lot of times we inadvertently kind of build up the excitement for these people, but not be real honest with them and say, this isn't what it's really like. This is going to be a close facsimile, but this is a training laboratory. That's what it's designed to do. Past that, you're going to have the real world experience, because the first time a piece of plaster, and for some folks, there's plaster and lab that falls out of the ceiling, but the first time a piece of plaster hits them in the helmet, and Chicken Little thinks the frickin' sky is falling, and they go jetting out the door, hence the Proby leash, that's when you can reel them back in and say, it's okay. It's a piece of plaster out of the ceiling. That happens. It wasn't going to happen in the burn building because we got the pageantite up there, and if that falls, we got bigger problems, and plus we have a report to do at the end. So just saying.
Yeah. When the other thing I wanted to mention earlier, the brain injury, thank you, Bobby, was when you go through the MIFRE back in the day, and Delaware was the same way. You did try to get as many certifications as fast as you could get them. And it was a race. It was a competition. It was all that. Well, and that's all well and good. Part of the things I've learned along the way is you can have every class MIFRE offers. And at one point I did. If you don't have the experience, the practical experience to go with those pieces of paper, they're just pieces of paper. That's all they are. You have to have the practical experience to back up those papers to make them credible. That's why I look back at some of the instructors that I have seen teach in the past, and they had all the documentation. They looked beautiful. They had no practical experience. So when they're teaching to their students, they cannot relay that practical experience aspect. They can teach the book, but that's the book.
Well, Mike and Bobby, let me ask you guys both this as long-term state fire school instructors, in addition to instructing outside of that format. I'm all for standards and making sure that we meet industry standards and that we have some line in the sand that delineates where we should be as an industry. I get that. One of the things that in the old school system that we used to have is you actually had when you took basic fire, there was a period of time after basic fire that you had to spend time in the field before you took special fires or fire, whatever it was after that. So you had time to actually be a practitioner of your trade. Now you can go through firefighter 1, firefighter 2, be a crew leader, and you've never had your ass on the working end of a hose line outside of pallets and straw. So what I want to say is, where do you guys see the balance? And this, I know we're kind of getting a little off topic, but I think this is a good tangent. Where do you guys see the balance between making sure we meet the current industry standards, so in today's fire service, and making sure that not only do we have the classroom and practical portion of it, but how do we gain that experience in between? Almost like the EMS end, where after you're an EMT, you had to have 150 calls before you went on to an ALS thing, 150 documented calls that you actually got your hands on a real patient and not Silicone Sally in the lab. So where do you guys feel that we are in that, and good, bad, and indifferent?
Bobby, I'm gonna let you answer that since I've been out of the game for a couple of years. So,
wow, that is a question. I was very blessed to be able to teach for the Delaware State Fire School. I was a training officer in my local volunteer fire department, and that opportunity got me to go to a different place. The one thing that I think I can only think about my own journey through this whole thing. To answer your first question about the standards versus real life, if we teach good, proper, fundamental, real life ways to do it, it will fit the standard. I've done a lot of standard checking when we do stuff, and if you teach the proper way to do something, it's almost always going to meet the standard. So to give you just a short example, that they say you need to have 2 members together at all times inside of an IDLH, right? And we said to people, hey, I'm going to be at the door and I'll talk to you. and we worked it out within doing the right thing. We're still in contact with each other. So we talked about voice contact because the standard didn't say you had to have Hickman's rookie leash. The standard said the two of you had to be together. The standard didn't say you had to touch each other. But a lot of places, a lot of fire academies, a lot of places started having people hooked to each other because that's kind of how they interpreted it. So, but my traveling through teaching for state academies was when you start off teaching, you don't know jack. When you start off teaching, you don't know anything because, in my opinion, the final phase of learning is teaching. So it's one thing if you know how to tie a bowline. That is nothing compared to trying to explain to 10 people how to tie a bowline. And so what do you have to do as an instructor? You have to break that thing down to how you never thought about it before to make sure that a guy like Hickman could understand it, And so that's that depth of education is actually when you're teaching. The problem is it's the cost of students. We all started off as instructors. It cost the students because we were just learning, but that's just part of the gig. But I'll never forget it. I was up in Delaware and when you're an instructor and they say, hey, you want to teach this? You go, yeah. Hey, you want to teach that? You go, yeah. Hey, you want to teach this? You go, yeah. It doesn't matter if you know what the hell you're talking about or not. When you're young, you think you're invincible. You can do anything. And I'll never forget, I was doing a truck company for their, I think it was called structural firefighting at the time. And I was doing truck company, and I really wasn't qualified to do truck company. So I was doing the through the lock commercial door entry thing, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I figured out a way to make it work. It wasn't the right way. And I'll never forget it. Little Franny came by, and anyone who taught Delaware State Fire School knows exactly who I'm talking about. But little Franny came by, and I guess he saw me. And he had been in the fire service a lot longer than I had, and he had no filter. And he just kind of walked up and watched it once, and he walked in front of me, and he took the next student, and he did it right. And he just kind of gave me this disappointed look and walked away, And that was probably my first lesson of, even though you're teaching, you need to be learning all the time. And that's part of the difficulty about being an instructor is you have to be learning all the time because everybody in that room knows something you don't know. I don't give a shit if it's a brand new probie guy that's never been in a fire in his entire life. I guarantee you he knows something you don't know. And that's kind of, what I learned kind of going through the whole teaching thing. My beef with state fire academies and things like that a little bit is that they play too safe. I really think they play too safe. I think that a lot of fire departments, especially volunteer fire departments, expect these guys to come out to be qualified firefighters. And I think the academy's expectations are that the fire departments are going to teach you how to do it. You know what I mean? And I've talked to guys in the cities, and it's the same way there, that they get a very generic kind of watered down, we can't really hurt anybody, we can't do anything, which is probably the same argument Hickman was having back in the 80s and 90s with MIFRE, is the same exact stuff. And I think they play a little bit too safe. And teaching privately, Trevor and I, sometimes we play a little bit too crazy. Sometimes we take an idea and run with it too fast before we kind of play it out and make sure it's the right thing to do and kind of do that thing. So there's somewhere in between all these private companies out here, like teaching all the newest, craziest stuff, and the state academies that are so conservative about these things that I just think the students are going in there and basically they're getting a show and tell on kind of what it's like to wear an air pack in a limited visibility environment. And they're really not taking a lot more than that from some of these academies. And they're great places, and I think they're very important places. I think they just need to take more risks to get a better level of education out there. That's my beef with state academies. But the other side of it is a lot of our private brothers that do this have hurt and killed people too. Using accelerants in houses and things. I just heard the other day I heard people were still using accelerants to do live fire training. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So there's two sides to the whole coin. We got to meet in the middle somewhere. That's just my opinion about it.
Right. And Bobby, to your point, one of the most honest answers I've ever heard come out, and Mike, I'm sorry this was after your time with MIFRE, but we had the annual instructor meetings, and usually they become piss and moan sessions, and sometimes they're productive, sometimes they're not. And it's probably been about at least 8 or 9 years ago where we had a moment of clarity where one of the directors or one of the higher ups in the academy said, look, the state fire academies are not designed to give you a turnkey firefighter. and you could hear a pin drop in the room because all of us were pushing to different things where we need to be more streetwise, be more pragmatic with our how we produce firefighters and what we're putting out there. I said, as a state academy, and I'm paraphrasing what they said, as a state academy, we have to be able to deliver a program that is equally as applicable to a rural fire department as it is an urban fire department. The onus is on the individual fire departments to fill in the blanks. And Bill Carey actually brought up in his comment here a little while ago, same thing. So that was an epiphany to the instructors because we were all really saying, well, we got to do this, got to do that. And why would you teach mountain rescue to people on the Eastern Shore of Maryland? And why would you teach surf rescue to people in the mountains of Western Maryland? And we had all these great ideas, but when they finally said, look, the fire chiefs in this state have a misconception that they're going to get a plug and play firefighter. But a lot of the, like anything else, whether you're a volunteer, career, or combination, you didn't have the resources, the time, the money, anything else to invest in that firefighter once they came to you. And all these chiefs were saying, give me a final product that when they come to my fire department, I can stick them in a jump seat and they're plug and play. And that was the disconnect that we had never talked about. So in fairness to the state fire academies, their function isn't to give you a plug and play firefighter, but that's what we thought for years. And that's what we thought we were producing in the programs. And we were pissed as instructors when we weren't getting the backing to produce a plug and play firefighter, but that was never the intent of the state academies. So as the individual departments, yes, that's where the captains, the lieutenants, the training officers, if they're so equipped, really come in, or it's up to the chiefs to figure out how to bridge that gap. So, I mean, that moment of honesty, I think from a state academy went so far in my mind, and it was really for me an epiphany. And that actually changed a little bit the way I was teaching because, Mike, I think you had already left. But as a young officer, and I was trying to bring more fire training into the department I used to work for in Ocean City. And again, this circles back, Doug Scott's kind of a cornerstone of a lot of these things. I expected anyone who had been in the fire service longer than me, they had to know more than me. They had to be more intelligent. They had to have more experience. They knew more than I did, but I was responsible for doing the training. And I was getting very frustrated if I had to do it over again. I mean, this was a big lesson learned. And I would get so frustrated at the end of the evolution that I was kind of, as we would say in Maryland, we had 3 levels of instructor, but we had instructor 1, 2, and 3, but you started going instructor 15 on people. You're kind of going like the Arlie Ermy, I can't believe this. What the hell? So you're kind of getting your instructor voice on. And then Dougie Scott pulls me aside and says, Trevor, you just tell them what you expect. I'm like, well, they should know. And he goes, they've never had this level of formalized fire training before. It's all been individually based. He said, you're the one who's brought formalized fire training to the department. You got to give them a roadmap. And it was one of those minutes where you just sat there dumbfounded and go, you kind of figured out that 1 and 1 equaled 2. But it took people like, Dougie Scott and Del Baker to pull me aside and say, look, dude, we know you're trying to go in the right direction and do the right thing. You've just got to tell these people what they expect because they've never had this level of formalized training. So that was a lesson learned for me to take a different approach and not make assumptions that just because people have been in longer than you, that they have the same outlook and that's something that Mike taught me too, over the years where, I might get fired up and very passionate about something, and Hickman was always good about putting the hand on your shoulder, and you're very much, how can I put this? You're very different, but very similar to like a Donald Fisher. And for those of you who don't know who Donald Fisher is, he was one of the long-serving chiefs of Ocean City, a very quiet man, a very humble man, but when he said something, you better shut up and listen because he had a lot of good stuff to say. And, Mike was, very similar to that, where he could give you some sage advice and put that hand on your shoulder and say, okay, look, think about it this way. And that's another one of the things, just kind of going around the horn here a little bit, that I respect so much about Bobby as well, because, Mike, me, you and Ben could see something very much in black and white. Bobby's going to see that shade of gray that none of us considered, and we're going to have that dumb look on our face go, oh, never thought about that. So give yourself the opportunity to, no matter how much time you have in or how much of a visceral reaction you have to something, be open enough to think there's another way to do it. And, Mike and Bobby, you guys have always been great at that. So how have you guys in your career overcome people like me who were young, full of piss and vinegar, trying to do things right, but you had to kind of rechannel the energy? How did you work with people like me?
You mean besides medication?
And alcohol, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Patience. You've got to have patience, and you've got to. In your case, you were easy.
He's been told that before.
And I mean that because
I wasn't cheap. I might have been easy. Wasn't cheap.
Yeah, exactly. You're the Labrador. You wanted to make everybody happy. Exactly, and that's a good thing. Trust me, because you were the Play-Doh. We could mold you. We could give you the information. You were the sponge. You took everything in, but you also asked all the right questions.
We'll talk about that after.
So you were easy, and I mean that with the utmost respect, because you had the thirst for knowledge. You were dedicated. You were impressionable, which was good and bad, by the way, because some of the practical jokes you did just went way too far. They were way out. But
I think that's probably more of an after show conversation.
Okay, real quick. I don't want to cut Hickman off, but the ultimate thing is when you call my mother to get my locker combination so you can break into. Never mind. That was new low, Mike. But anyway, another show, another time.
So, guys like you, it's easy. It's the ones who don't have the desire, who are kind of just like swimming through because they want the front tag on the truck that says firefighter. They want to be able to do the social stuff. They want to be able to wear the jacket with their affiliation. They want the T-shirt, so to speak. They're the ones that are difficult because at some point in time they're going to have the opportunity to make a difference or not make a difference. And because they have not put serious thought and effort into what they're doing, they're going to make the bad decision, the wrong choice. They're not going to be able to help when they should be able to. So they're the ones that I struggle with or have struggled with through the years, because I know from the very beginning that they're not there for the right reason. And we've seen it. I was notorious for the first few weeks of our summer help season, summer not, of making people get out of the ambulance, walk back to the firehouse, and quit. But it wasn't because I was being a complete and total ass. Well, I was, but I also knew from the very get-go that they weren't going to perform to the level that we required in Ocean City. It's just that simple. And I knew that if I forced the issue, they didn't have it in their heart to stay and learn and be educated and be what we desired, and they would quit. They literally, guy got out of 17th Street, walked back to 15th Street, and said, I can't take this anymore, and drove back to Virginia. Sorry for your luck, but the benefit was we were better off at that point. Bobby? I see you nodding your head.
Oh my God. Sure. I really don't. I don't know how to add to that, Mike. I think that's, I think that as people kind of look to us to give them instruction and things like that, when you say people are here for the wrong reasons, I think we all started for the wrong reasons. I got to tell you something. I don't know of any firemen that came in because they wanted to serve their community. I know we say that a lot. I know we write it on lots of fire trucks and placards and signs and
that's the interview
and everything else. But in reality, our next amusement park ride. You know what I mean? It was something very exciting. It was something very different. For me, it was anyway. It was very, very exciting and very different. And long time into this thing, trying to figure out where I fit into it. You know what I mean? How to pull a hand line, how to operate in zero visibility, how to not be scared to death. You know what I mean? How to work through your fears, how to do all that kind of stuff. I kind of went through all those phases, and later on, I realized I saw the rules that we made for firemen were all about firemen and firefighters, I guess you should say, And so I was like, I looked at 2 in, 2 out. And I said, well, what's that about? That's about 2 firefighters outside in case 2 firefighters get in trouble inside. I looked at a continuous water supply. What was that about? That was about making sure that these guys didn't run out of water inside of a fire. Looked at staffing models. We looked at, you can look at everything. You can look at everything. And all of a sudden, a light bulb flashed in my head that this has nothing to do with an 8-year-old in flannel pajamas at the end of a hallway. All of the things that we put in place are really for our safety, but our mission is that 8-year-old in flannel pajamas at the end of the hallway. And that was a really good awakening for me, because it kind of, I've never taught, nor have I ever seen taught at any fire academy anywhere in this country where search and rescue was asking someone out front if someone was inside. So in the world of 2 in and 2 out, the OSHA rule, it says that if there's a rescue, that the OSHA rule does not apply for 2 in 2 out. The only way I know there's nobody inside that building is by completing a search. And so I've kind of looked at the standards and things like that and said, you really need to think all the time about the citizens that we serve. We're in this for the fun. We love this gig. We love doing the firefighting. We love doing, I love doing the paramedic stuff. I love it. And I love doing all that stuff. But in reality, I love it because it's a great joy for me to do this gig. But at the end of the day, it really is about the person on the end of the IV. It's really about the 8-year-old in flannel pajamas. It's about the person that didn't call. You know what I mean? It's right. It's all good and well to come out and say, okay, there's nobody inside. When an apparatus shows up right away and says there's nobody inside, I know someone told them that. And sadly in Pennsylvania a few years ago, the daycare workers told them there's nobody inside. And I don't know if it changed their tactics or not, but I know later on they had miscounted. What a horrible day that is. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my whole spin. So, as being an instructor, we never know it all. We got to continue to learn. And we always got to remember that we get the privilege of doing this, but our payment is to always think about the 8-year-old in flannel pajamas at the end of the hallway first. So that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your questions or not. I don't know, but that's just kind of my thought. That's kind of my closing too. I mean, that's really, I think we're getting close to the end here. So I really appreciate you having on, Mike. And, I never knew that your first fire was a line of duty death. I didn't know that. And, props to you for staying in here and using that experience to teach other guys. That's really, really great that you stayed around for us, man. So I thank you for that.
I appreciate that, brother. I was thinking earlier today when Ben gave the topic and all that, don't be the firefighter who's stuck in the 70s. And what I mean by that is we all know the guy in the firehouse who one day he just decides that's it. I'm not going to learn anymore. I'm not going to progress from this point forward. I'm going to be stuck on my last day of training, which was November 6, 1974. And on a cardiac arrest, our first drug was sodium bicarb. Don't be that guy. If you find yourself in that routine, you might want to start thinking about making other changes, not necessarily leaving the career, but reevaluating your situation and saying, how can I be the best person that I can be? That is probably the biggest insult that you can do to your profession is you stop. You just, I don't know what happens, a trigger point, something like that, but get past it, work past it, be a better person. And Ben, Trevor, Bobby, I really do appreciate the invitation. This has been very, very informative. I would like to come back at another episode. And Bobby brought up something that is near and dear to my heart. And I thought about the topic a while back, and it's basically the Firehouse Roundtable. It's stories that you tell, and the kids are listening. And they get this, I got to be like these guys. And when you get in the fire search and listen to the old guys, no house or no structure is vacant until proven so by the fire department. And I kind of have issues with that when guys are telling the story because they leave out one of the biggest parts of it. And I'd like to have a roundtable discussion with the four of us when it comes to fire department lore and you're sitting around telling stories, what it does to the younger generation. Gentlemen, I do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Mike. Absolutely, and I think that should be its own show. It might be a part 1, 2, and 3. I've got a lot of stories to tell about Mike. 99% of them are very positive. I was just getting ready to type it in, but I figured, since you kind of led into it, Mike has used people as doormats as well. But after he stepped on people getting into a structure to do a search or, knock a fire down, he's been very kind. He's picked them back up and dusted his boot print off their back. And, he called them Matt for the rest of the day. So we've been on a lot of those fires together, Mike. We've been through a lot of doors together, not only, on the fire side, but on the LE side as well. And, I say great deal of respect for, not only the mentorship, but the friendship that you've given, not only to me, but a lot of people in the industry. And, Mike always kind of says it how it is, and it's unfiltered, but it's going to be true. And each and every time, he's going to give you the plain version of what's going on, and it's going to be the very honest truth. So I think that as far as trying to emulate people who are mentors in the industry, Mike, you're definitely one of those people. Again, from a personal, professional side, nothing but love and respect for you, brother. Again, you've been there for me in good times, the worst times, and some of the freaking funniest times I've ever had. On the job and in personal life as well. So. With that being said, I'll pitch back to Ben, just kind of close us out. But, I think it's important to kind of do a little bit of introspection to say, what have I done well over my career? What have I not so well? And if I had to do it over again, which was kind of a little bit of the premise of tonight's show, what are those things? Because you own your mistakes, but you never really fail. Either you succeed or you learn. And if you don't have that mindset, then it goes back to what Mike said, that you're stuck at whatever plateau or whatever stratification layer that you decided to exit the fire service. Don't be a rod. Don't be retired on duty. I see my boy Wade's in here. What's that? What's that?
What the hell is a stratification layer?
That's an officer word, man.
That's some cool shit.
It's on the captain's test, Bobby. Bobby, it's on the captain's test. You don't have to worry about that one. So, sorry, brother. I had to throw you under the bus. Change your oil while you're there. But but make sure as you go back, you do some introspection and say, look, what can I do better? And be honest with yourself. There's some things. Look, you're going to make some bad decisions over the course of your career. I don't want to say that's okay, but as long as you learn from them and you can use them as a teaching point, then move forward with it by all means. But don't sit there. Don't hide your mistakes. Don't bury your mistakes. But don't. And I'll say this kind of as an ending point. From an officer standpoint, from an instructor standpoint, we always want to be infallible. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable in front of your people. I saw my boy Wade on here earlier. They used to call them the Loafs, the League of Average Firefighters out there in the Midwest, out in Kansas. So, don't be afraid to fail in front of your people. They understand you're human, but just be honest with it and say, guys, look, I effed that up. That was not my finest day, because you'll be amazed at how quick your brothers and sisters will pick you back up and say, dude, it's okay, because you know what? You were able to show them that you were honest with them because you're honest with yourself. And that's one of the things, that's one of the traits I think that I've seen, not only through Mike, you especially over the years, Bobby, you do that through your teaching and your everyday stuff. And Ben, that's something I think that you instill in your folks coming up. So again, Mike, glad to have you on here. We're going to have you on here again. Please shave that crap off your face. It's freaking me out, but I love you, brother. And I'll pitch it over to Ben.
Well, thanks, guys. Again, it was a great show. I echo all the statements from you guys to this point. I just to kind of close things up and wrap up. The one thing the common theme that I had heard through all of this is our mentors. We like that 50-50, like that Bobby first mentioned in the very beginning. The 50% good, the 50%. I'm not going to say bad. I'm going to say honest, because if it's good, it's honest either way. But don't be afraid to give them that constructive criticism to build them up to make them better. Well, geez, Bobby, you didn't have to. All right. But
that was Delaware Internet.
Okay.
The hamster, they didn't feed him. He stopped running, so they cut him off. Yeah.
But like Bobby had mentioned, be honest with your folks. Give them the good when they deserve it. At the same time, don't be afraid to put that boot up their hind parts to let them know. But then make sure you follow that back up and build them back up, so that way they don't leave knowing or thinking that that's what you think of them. Those new people, they're very impressionable, and we have to take care of them. If they're especially new to the fire service in general, they don't have any family members in it. They come in out of nowhere, and they're just looking for a direction. We can't treat those people, the bad all the time. We have to give them the good. We have to give them the encouragement. But like we've talked all night, you have to give them the honesty. You have to give them the truth of the matter. You have to give them what it's going to be like in the real world. And that's for their safety, and it's for our safety. I mean, ultimately, when they're on the end of the Hickman leash, which I do believe is available in the fire store, comes in glow in the dark and in black. So that is available. Make sure you guys go check that out. It is licensed and endorsed by Michael W. C. Hickman. I don't know those. I have no idea what your initials are, but there we go.
It is Michael C. Hickman, and supplies are limited. Order now.
Yeah.
I only make about one a day, so you better get it quick.
So take your time and invest in that person, and be the mentor that brought you up. All right, take that time and be the right people to take care of your people. So with that being said, thank you again for joining, everybody. We are back December. Holy cow, October 29th. So the day before I'm all messed up. The day before Halloween. Have no idea what we're doing yet, but I promise it's going to be good. So keep watching our Facebook page. Also, we did just redesign the website, so check that out. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, something we screwed up, something I screwed up when we redid that, let me know so we can get it corrected. But other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.